Like, does this, imagine you invested into her being the face of the movie and she's the main character and she's trying to promote the movie. Would this make you want to go watch the movie when she's starring in it and she's the main character? Go ahead, Rob, play the clip.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them,
she's a good actress.
Hard. And it's lonely. It's very lonely. I just know that if that...
Now, we've spoken about the box office disaster that is Disney's Snow White and the lead actress's delusions of grandeur.
Rachel Zegler may have once been considered the shining starlet of Hollywood, personally chosen by none other than Steven Spielberg himself. With a Golden Globe clutched in her hand. At just 20 years old, she was praised as a once-in-a-generation talent and voice. But today, she's become the theatrical equivalent of a budget Broadway tour. Let's not pretend otherwise. Her stage performance ticket prices have plummeted to pay whatever you can. In other words, you could toss a single coin into a donation jar and still land yourself a seat right in the front row of the Rachel Zegler experience. And at this point, no one's entirely certain if that's a great deal or an ominous warning. Because somehow, in the span of just 3 brief years, she's managed to transform from Disney's dazzling diamond into its most chaotic public relations nightmare. And perhaps the most astonishing part, there was no scandal, no sudden cancellation, no dramatic fall from grace. She orchestrated the entire downfall herself, one awkward, painfully cringe-worthy interview after another. So let's hit rewind. Everyone believed West Side Story would serve as her grand coronation, Spielberg's Midas touch. The legendary role of Maria in a beloved musical classic brought back to life. But rather than bursting onto the scene with cinematic fireworks, the film did a gentle shuffle right into the void of commercial insignificance. $76 million in global earnings against a bloated $100 million budget. That's not a blockbuster. That's an overpriced vanity project no one was clamoring for. And that, my friends, was merely the opening act of her very public unraveling.
It's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Because Rachel didn't simply shrug it off and move forward, no. She went full throttle. She leaned in harder. She treated every single press appearance like it was an opportunity to present a graduate-level dissertation on social justice rather than, promote a musical. She broke the film down as if it were a political manifesto, completely forgetting that it's essentially Romeo and Juliet but with jazz hands. And instead of winning over audiences with charm, she pushed them away at record speed faster. Then you can say gender politics and fairy tales. But here's the thing, West Side Story wasn't the actual implosion. That was just the spark before the full-blown inferno. The real catastrophe? Snow White, or, as Rachel seemed to view it, her golden opportunity to completely dismantle and set fire to the beloved legacy of Disney's very first princess. In a spectacular storm of feminist buzzwords, bizarre accents, and relentless self-sabotage. Now, let's dive into the accent situation, because honestly, that deserves its own musical parody. Rachel, who is publicly known not to be fluent in Spanish, suddenly began rolling hers so dramatically it felt like she was channeling the restless ghost of a telenovela host. Latino audiences weren't thrilled, they were baffled. As in, are we supposed to feel flattered by this, or just incredibly awkward? Because this isn't cultural representation, it's more like theatrical cosplay with bonus subtitles.
I'm a narcissist. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evident.
And then came the interviews. Oh yes, the interviews. Rachel managed to turn every single Snow White press stop into a cringe-worthy performance. Worthy of its own highlight reel, she dragged the original 1937 animated classic like it was some kind of cinematic war crime. She called it outdated, ignorant, and fundamentally problematic. She even claimed the prince was, get this, a stalker. A literal stalker. All because he kissed a poisoned princess to save her life, in Rachel's 2024 worldview. Apparently, fairy tale romance now qualifies as criminal misconduct. Fantastic job. But she didn't stop at just critiquing the film. No. She went scorched earth, dismantling it with complete and utter conviction. She proudly announced that her version of Snow White doesn't dream about falling in love, she dreams about leadership. That's right, because apparently what every young girl truly wants from a Disney princess is to grow up and become a CEO with unresolved trauma. Forget enchanted mirrors and magical songs. Let's talk about Lincoln goals and quarterly earnings. Reports
that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
And Disney? Well, at first, they stayed completely silent, likely crossing their fingers, hoping the chaos would pass like a brief storm. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Rachel kept speaking, and the internet kept paying attention. Reddit threads exploded. Fan forums turned vicious. Disney moms and their theme park dads clutched both their pearls and their wallets. Suddenly, Disney's Grand Princess reboot had all the warmth and charm of a government hearing. Behind the scenes, the studio went into full-on panic mode. Damage control alarms started blaring. They quietly began scrubbing Rachel from promotional material, postponed the film's release, and removed her from merchandise altogether. She morphed into a ghost, technically the lead of Snow White, yet mysteriously absent from ads, posters, toy aisles, and Walmart shelves. That wasn't a clever marketing pivot. That was a desperate PR triage. And then came the nuclear meltdown. A resurfaced clip showed Rachel shouting, "F Donald Trump. May his supporters never know peace." Oh yes, she actually posted that. You're Disney's leading lady, wearing a tiara on one hand and flipping off half the country with the other. Subtle? Not even close. Now, you might think that would have been her come-to-Jesus moment, right? No. She doubled down again. She took to TikTok and told her viewers, if you disagree, I don't need your business. Girl, let's seriously talk business. Because while Rachel was out here alienating half the American audience and trying to cancel anyone who dared to challenge her views, the box office was doing something else, canceling her. Snow White tanked so catastrophically. It made Morbius look like a surprise fan favorite. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Rachel decided, you know what this disaster needs? A live theater show.
At the London Palladium, the celeb, who stars as the late Eva Perón in the musical, made a sudden exit from the stage without returning to kick off the second act with her iconic balcony rendition of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina.
Enter Evita at the London Palladium, a legendary role on a sacred stage. Steeped in theatrical history, and Rachel? She transformed it into a full-blown Broadway fever dream. Tickets were originally going for $500. That's right, $500,000. To watch Rachel Zegler pretend to be Eva Perón while metaphorically dodging the Rotten Tomatoes. Hurled by public opinion. And what did she do on opening night? She gave the audience a live stream. No, seriously, not a joke.
In fact, an eyewitness tells E! News that around 15 minutes into the interview,
she stepped out onto a balcony just outside the theater and belted out Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Two fans gathered on the street, who watched for free as paying audience members sat indoors, witnessing the whole thing unfold on a giant screen. Imagine shelling out hundreds of dollars for a live stage show, only to be served a TikTok-style projection that feels like a glitchy 2004 DVD experience. People were furious. Twitter ignited like it was Christmas morning. One user vented, I paid for $100 to watch Rachel Zegler on FaceTime. Another dub at Broadway's first ever pay-per-view scam. And things just spiraled from there. Reportedly, the show's producers were enraged. Theatergoers began asking for refunds. Ticket prices nosedived. What began as a prestige performance devolved into a full-blown PR catastrophe within a few weeks. Evita was operating on a pay-what-you-can basis. Some nights were completely free, not discount-free. Just drop a coin in a donation box like you're tipping a street performer. That's not a comeback. That's careerhospice.now. Let's unpack what pay what you want really means on Broadway it signals surrender. It's not merely an acknowledgement that seats aren't selling, it's a last-ditch effort to fill them, just so the theater doesn't look like a dress rehearsal. And when Rachel Zegler is headlining a musical that's playing for free, it isn't merely a flop. It's a red flag to casting directors. She's no longer a bankable asset. Because this isn't just about empty seats. It's about image, about brand credibility. And Rachel has burned hers so thoroughly that even her most diehard fans are slowly backing away. Those who once hailed her as the next Barbra Streisand and are now pretending they never hit tweet. The media outlets that once celebrated her as Hollywood's rising star are too busy spotlighting Sydney Sweeney and Jenna Ortega to bother mentioning her. When Wednesday Addams is stealing your thunder, it's time to reassess, and make no mistake, she knows Rachel's been active online, lurking and throwing shade like a high school senior bitter about prom. She's been posting lengthy apologies that somehow never sound genuinely remorseful. More like she's upset that people caught on. The underlying message is always, I'm evolving, I'm growing, but never, I'm messed up. And here lies the heart of the Rachel Zegler problem. It's not that she's inexperienced, not that she made missteps, everyone does. It's that she refused to course correct. The fake accent, she stuck with it. The hot takes, she doubled down. The interviews where she criticized the very projects that launched her, she leaned further in. There's a thin line between being genuine and being egotistical. Rachel's PR strategy has been a textbook example of how to alienate an audience. While claiming victimhood, at one point, she even likened her backlash to bullying, claiming she regularly receives threats and hate online. And while abuse should never be condoned, the reason sympathy was scarce is clear. Rachel Zegler didn't just rub people the wrong way. She actively picked fights with the very communities that could have made her a superstar: theater geeks, Disney loyalists, conservatives, even casual movie lovers. She pushed everyone away, one tweet at a time. Remember her infamous Snow White quote, "She won't be saved by the prince, and she's not dreaming of true love," but that's literally the story. You don't go to Cinderella and complain about glass slippers. You don't take the role of Snow White and then trash the movie for being what it is. You don't torch the legacy because you're momentarily feeling superior. But Rachel did. And now the fallout is here. She's been quietly shut out of future Disney projects. Other studios are distancing themselves. There are whispers that even streaming giants are hesitant to cast her in anything that demands real investment. Not because she's outspoken, Hollywood loves a bold voice, but because she's bad for business. A high risk, low reward, pure liability. And perhaps the saddest irony of all, her Broadway performance wasn't even lacking in skill. Critics acknowledged her vocal strength and stage presence. The issue was the baggage she carried: the drama, the entitlement, the diva aura without the legacy to back it up. Here's the thing: when you act like a legend, you better deliver legendary results. Beyoncé can demand a spotlight. Lady Gaga can be quirky. Barbra Streisand earned her diva license. Rachel, she's got one box office bomb and a failed Disney title. You can't play the victim and the trailblazer when your career is on life support and you're live. Shows are practically panhandling. The irony writes itself. The same woman who once scoffed, "I don't need your support," is now performing in a show literally begging for audience donations, and still, no public accountability, no meaningful apology, just more of the self-important posturing that got her here. And yes, Hollywood is paying attention. Because Rachel isn't just one actress who fell from grace. She's a case study, a living example of what happens when confidence outweighs talent, when someone confuses early hype with lasting relevance, when you assume Hollywood owes you reverence because a few headlines once praised you. Even her colleagues are stepping back. There's no chorus of celebrities defending her. No viral hashtag stand with Rachel. Just silence, echoing, career stalling. Silence. Why? Because everyone sees it now. This wasn't sabotage. It wasn't a media hit job. Rachel walked into interviews, onto stages, into social media battles, and said things that made people uncomfortable or alienated. And when the backlash came, She didn't soften, she struck the match again, then danced through the fire on TikTok. Now, instead of starring in Disney's latest blockbuster, she's trending as the face of Broadway's most humiliating financial failure in years. Instead of being a Vanity Fair cover girl, she's become the meme of every theater kid's snarky group chat. And it's a shame, not because she lacks talent, but because she squandered the opportunity. Rachel Zegler had the raw materials, the talent, the looks, the Spielberg nod. She could have built a legacy, but instead, she courted controversy after controversy until her reputation collapsed. And now she's standing in the rubble, pretending she's still the protagonist of some misunderstood hero arc. What's almost heartbreaking is that she still seems to think she is. Still tweets like she's mid-redemption. Still posts wellness. Selfies like the backlash is something noble she's rising above. But here's the reality. When you're the one who set the fire, you don't get to call yourself a phoenix. The insiders are not quietly speculating about her comeback. They are openly wondering who will take her place. Because let's be clear, Rachel Zegler's spot in the spotlight disappeared the moment she began torching relationships and celebrating the fallout as if it were a badge of feminist honor. Her PR team has tried every possible angle. She's young, she's discovering herself, she's driven. But passion is not the core problem here. The problem is discipline. The problem is planning. And Rachel's public relations tactics have resembled a clumsy, blindfolded food fight desperate for the internet to interpret it as bravery. Spoiler alert, they didn't. First they mocked it, then they just stopped caring. In the meantime, the Snow White reboot, once hailed as her golden ticket to Hollywood royalty, has become nearly untouchable. Word is, Disney, which initially imagined an entire franchise, has hit pause on sequels, quiet terminations, hush re-edits, and a promotional effort that has effectively erased its own lead actress. Rumors now suggest Disney is gradually introducing a new face for future remakes. Yes, it's that serious. Fumbling Snow White so hard the studio has to rethink the entire brand just to avoid the backlash her name evokes, but it was the Broadway fiasco that sealed her fate. When a production starring your name is practically handing out tickets to avoid the shame of empty seats, that's not a career hiccup, that's an existential flameout. Broadway is a beast of a different kind. No effects, no retakes, no post-production magic. You either dominate the stage or get consumed by the void. Rachel? The void one dot to make things worse. She tried to spin her balcony performance as some heartfelt gesture, singing to the crowd outside, like it was a tribute. Please, that wasn't intimacy. It was PR triage, an awkward attempt at salvaging face. The audience inside, the ones who actually paid, they weren't moved, they were furious. They didn't spend hundreds for a street serenade. They paid for the electricity of live theater, the atmosphere, the immersion, the promise of something extraordinary. What they got was a distant figure waving like she was hosting a clearance sale. And as for her taking on the role of Eva Peron, audacious doesn't even begin to cover it. Eva is commanding, multidimensional, revered. To assume that persona while your reputation is actively crumbling, that's not fearless. That's delusional. Like strolling into a storm armed with nothing but a mirror selfie. The theater world saw through it instantly. Critics may have been diplomatic, but the audiences, not so much. And in the TikTok era, it only takes one viral misstep to derail an entire show. Rachel handed them a catalog. The backstage drama, the awkward fan interactions, the never-ending interviews that circled back to her polarizing opinions. It all felt like witnessing someone set fire to their own dreams on live stream. And the saddest part, she genuinely seemed to believe we'd all clap anyway. Somewhere along the line, Rachel stopped listening. She treated constructive feedback as personal attacks and criticism as betrayal. Any dissenting voice was labeled a hater. But when you surround yourself with only yes men, every stumble feels like sabotage. This wasn't sabotage, it was a self-made implosion. We saw her journey from Spielberg's bright new star to Disney's PR nightmare to Broadway's cautionary tale. And through it all, she kept posting, still sharing motivational captions like the world hadn't changed, like we were still applauding. But we weren't. Some fans remain. They always do. But most have walked away, exhausted by the drama, the contradictions. The arrogance dressed as empowerment. Rachel's story could have been iconic at Jersey. Girl who broke boundaries, a Latina powerhouse who ruled stage and screen. She had it all. But instead of evolving, she escalated. Instead of reflecting, she raged. Instead of repairing, she ruined. Now, she's paying the price. Casting calls have slowed. Media stops are drying up. Her name doesn't light up the boardrooms anymore. Because in Hollywood, reputations linger and so does baggage. And no, Rachel isn't canceled. That would be too convenient. She's not some misunderstood truth teller. She's a star who forgot that talent alone isn't enough. That lickability matters. That gratitude isn't optional. When the lights go out, what remains is your bond with the audience. And if you've mocked, ignored, or belittled them, don't act shocked when they disappear. Which brings us back. 0 tickets sold. The grim punctuation mark on a downward spiral. A punchline draped in posters. Because when a Broadway production is forced to give seats away just to fill a theater, it's not just a slump, it's a statement. Rachel's career isn't over, but it's severely wounded. And the second chance she once had is buried under a landslide of regrettable choices. If she still believes this is temporary, she should take a good look at the data. Rachel didn't trip. She sprinted off a cliff and asked for applause on the way down. And now the same industry that once bet on her is turning its back. The executives don't see her as bold. They see a liability in lipstick. Studios follow numbers. And Rachel's metrics, unfavorable. Negative headlines, disengaged audiences, controversy-heavy history. She doesn't bring in crowds, she drives them away. And Broadway, it's done. Word backstage is she's unofficially blacklisted. Not for lack of ability, but because she brings chaos. Theaters want leaders, not loose cannons. Her fans, defensive and dwindling. Social media has become a battlefield. Each post, a new fight. The celebration is gone. What's left is a comment. War zone. Even her peers are gone quiet. The red carpet smiles have faded. Former co-stars are declining comment. And Hollywood silences its own message. And Rachel? She keeps tweeting, keeps uploading, keeps spiraling. She could have gone the Selena Gomez route, retreat, reset, return. Instead, she's on the Lindsay Lohan loop, without the charm. Audiences remember when they're dismissed, when their stories are mocked, when fairy tales are reduced to lectures. They remember Snow White wasn't supposed to be reimagined into a TED Talk. It was about dreams, magic, hope. Rachel gave them cynicism, and then dared them to be grateful. The tragedy, she was special. Spielberg saw it. We all saw it. But talent without humility, it burns out fast. Now, the calls have stopped. The theaters are dimming. And new stars are rising, ones who smile, who listen, who honor the work. Rachel's still stuck in the denial phase, pretending the storm is a breeze. But the storm is real. It's in the casting sheets, the DMIS, the thank you, next emails. Once you lose trust in this town, getting it back takes years. And Rachel? She isn't fighting for it. She's pouting through it, acting like the world's at fault, like the crowd is the problem. But the crowd understood. That's the real sting. They saw exactly who she was and chose to leave. Because charm still matters, respect still matters. And if you forget that, the applause stops. This isn't cancel culture. It's consequence culture. And Rachel's learning far too late that you don't get to keep the mic just because you want to. Sometimes the spotlight fades and all that remains is silence.